With all the hate that the Boruto franchise has gotten over the years, it's kind of crazy to say that for the most part, a lot of it is inaccurate, and the Boruto series as a whole, in particular the manga, has been a lot more successful and is currently on the rise, more so than people even realize. Because since its inception, Boruto has faced a wide variety of criticisms as a franchise, being a spin-off to one of the most popular and successful series of all time, Naruto. Boruto had huge shoes to fill, high expectations to meet, and just in general, a lot of people were looking at the Boruto series as, well, how successful will this be in comparison to Naruto? Because that's the gift and the curse of being a spin-off sequel to one of the most popular series of all time. The fact that most people are going to always compare it to its predecessor, it's just inevitable. And between the anime receiving much criticism and backlash due to the fact of it being a weekly series, while the manga being a monthly publication, led to a ton of filler episodes or anime-only episodes, however you want to call it, which in turn turned a lot of people off. And before we continue, hit that subscribe button and that bell to get more notifications on the world of anime, manga, and in particular the Boruto Naruto franchise. When the Boruto manga and anime first started, it started of course with that flash forward to the epic battle between Boruto and Kawaki from the time skip, which had a lot of people looking forward towards something of a tone like that. But the Boruto manga and anime both decided to take a different route and a different approach, and it seemed as though it was trying to get more of a younger audience involved, considering the fact that again it was a spin-off sequel to its predecessor Naruto. The Boruto series decided to strategize and try and find a way to get newer fans and younger fans involved to kind of grow the audience and establish an entirely new fan base while still having the Naruto fan base as kind of a padding. And while it definitely helped and the Boruto series has sold quite a few volumes, ultimately it just received more scrutiny because of that same fact. And I think also a lack of understanding amongst fandoms of what different series and different publications can actually do has definitely led to a lot of the down talk, downplaying, and just in general dismissal of what Boruto is actually doing and accomplishing. Because as it stands right now, with 23 volumes of Boruto, 20 being from the first series, and so far 3 that are released as of the recording of this video for the sequel series, Boruto 2 Blue Vortex, the Boruto manga is currently sitting at over 4.1 million copies in Japan alone. And even stating that number right there is something that'll be divisive, because while some fans will appreciate it and say, wow, over 4 million copies for a manga that people say nobody reads, nobody cares about, that's a pretty huge achievement. But then there's a subsection of fans that follow the sales of Weekly Shonen Jump manga, which they're pushed by a magazine that is a lot more popular than the publication that the Boruto manga is in, because Boruto, in case you don't know, is not in Weekly Shonen Jump. It's in a side magazine, V Jump, that gets a lot less exposure. And so when you hear over 4.1 million sales for Boruto, some fans look at it as, well, Jujutsu Kaisen just sold over 100 million. Likewise with My Hero Academia. Demon Slayer is sitting at hundreds of millions of copies. 4.1 compared to that is nothing. But again, those are two different scenarios. This is a monthly manga that is released in a side magazine that doesn't get the same push, same exposure, and I'd also imagine in general isn't being shipped to stores as quickly as some of the others. Because again, the backing that they have would be a part of Weekly Shonen Jump. And while yes, in comparison to some of the anomalies or in general some of the long runners, Boruto can't compete compared to One Piece's 500 million sales or My Hero's 100 million. But if you take out some of the major heavy hitters, Boruto isn't sitting bad at all in comparison to some of the current manga that Shonen Jump, the higher publication, are running right now. Because taking a look at one of the updated graphs of sales for the various manga that are in Shonen Jump at the moment, Boruto still has more sales than majority of the stuff that is in Shonen Jump. Mission Yozako the Family sitting at 2.5 million with 22 volumes, which is only 1 volume shy away from being the same amount as Boruto. Likewise with Akane Banashi, Undead Unluck. Like legitimately outside of Sakamoto Days and Blue Box, Boruto has more sales than majority of everything that is in Weekly Shonen Jump. And of course except the Goliath that is One Piece. But I'm sure there's going to be some fans that are going to say, oh, big whoop, Boruto is more popular than a bunch of noobs that haven't had anime adaptations and in general just haven't had an explosion yet. That still doesn't mean that Boruto is a major success, which then brings me to example number 2. One of the biggest contemporaries that you could compare Boruto to is the Dragon Ball Super manga, the Dragon Ball Super franchise as a whole. Dragon Ball Super essentially is in the same boat as Boruto in terms of an older IP that was a classic Shonen Jump series that is now running a monthly spin-off manga. And while Dragon Ball Super's manga sales are considered a commercial success, ultimately if you take a closer look at the numbers, it's not that far off from what Boruto does. Because even though the Boruto manga started off very strong with over 400,000 sales for his first volume, it definitely declined over time. A lot of the original Naruto fans checked out clearly after the first few volumes due to the fact that, well, Boruto started off with recapping a movie that a lot of Naruto fans saw multiple times, and in general, it just really didn't hook fans. But after a certain point, the Boruto manga has kind of stabilized, especially over the last couple of years. Because if you look at the numbers, the Boruto manga is averaging roughly 100,000 sales per volume. In fact, with some latest updates, the Boruto manga with 2 Blue Vortex Volume 2 has over 121,000 copies out there right now, which is the biggest volume the Boruto manga has had in over 2 years. Not to mention the fact that third volume is about to hit 100,000 sales in a few weeks as well. And it seems as though since the Boruto anime went off air and the manga went into the sequel spin-off series 2 Blue Vortex, Boruto manga is actually going up, which is crazy to say that an IP would actually increase with its TV anime that is normally used as a essentially big commercial for the manga, but it's rising while the anime ends. But regardless, looking at those numbers, while they're not as much as Dragon Ball Super, again, they're not far off. Looking at this sales chart of Dragon Ball Super, for starters, and this is no shade to Dragon Ball Super, it's just to give a demonstration, Dragon Ball Super's biggest volume sales was roughly Volume 5 with roughly 270,000 copies sold in that ballpark, while Boruto started off with 400,000 sales. However, Dragon Ball Super has maintained an average of closer to about 150,000 to 200,000 sales per volume, which is definitely more than Boruto, but not by a crazy margin as people would make you believe. In fact, the latest volume on this chart, which I want to say was adapting the superhero movie stuff, is under 150,000. So realistically, Dragon Ball Super, while it's touted as this commercial success manga-wise, while Boruto is touted as a failure, it's not selling a crazy amount more than Boruto. Also take into account the fact that Dragon Ball Super had an enormously successful anime adaptation. I mean, there was people out in the streets in different countries, tens of thousands, that were screaming and celebrating during the Tournament of Power. And there was 2 films that did highly successful in the box office, bringing in over $100 million in revenue per film. Meanwhile, the Boruto series hasn't had a film technically since 2015's Boruto Naruto the movie, which was still kind of leaning into the Naruto IP because this was before the inception of the Boruto manga and anime. So Dragon Ball Super has had way more exposure in the mainstream and way more success with their TV anime and TV film counterparts than Boruto has, which would definitely account for the higher sales than Boruto, but still, for that crazy amount of success, you would think it would be by a lot higher margin. In fact, while Dragon Ball Super's numbers seemingly are going down, Boruto's numbers are going up. And of course, comparing Boruto to Naruto, it's never gonna have Boruto looking in the best of light. Naruto's manga, even from the very inception, the first handful of volumes, it was selling over 500,000 copies, and over time, even with the last volume, was doing millions upon millions of copies. So in comparison to its predecessor, which that's normally the case, the initial series is always going to be the successful breadwinner, while the spin-off rarely ever surpasses the initial series. But it seems as though, despite the fact that people have counted the Boruto series out, the manga is increasing in sales, or at the very least stabilized with an average of 100,000 sales. The fandom is eagerly awaiting the return of the anime, and that's also something to note. The fact that the Boruto anime, despite that it went off air, they made sure to confirm with fans that it's not permanent and the series is essentially going on a hiatus, which they never even did with Bleach. Bleach anime back in 2012 just kind of went off air and fans were just left to hope that it would return one day, which it definitely did with a grand slam of the 1,000-Year Blood War anime. But if the Boruto anime was a complete failure, they wouldn't have made sure to let fans know that, hey, Boruto anime is coming back. In fact, it seems as though they're gearing up for a big Boruto 2 Blue Vortex seasonal release potentially within the next few years as well, based on the moves that Studio Pierrot has been doing with stuff like Bleach's 1,000-Year Blood War. So while yes, Boruto as a IP, as a franchise, manga, anime, all of that has faced several challenges, hurdles, criticism, and in general backlash, ultimately it seems as though it's finally the time where the series is turning around, sales are stabilizing and going up, and in comparison to its contemporaries like Dragon Ball Super or majority of the newer manga within even Weekly Shonen Jump, a higher and more mainstream publication, the Boruto series is sitting pretty. And on a personal note, if you are an old Naruto fan that never gave Boruto a try, I highly recommend reading the manga. The anime gave you a bad taste in your mouth, understandably so, but the manga is straight raw to the point, and especially where we're at with 2 Blue Vortex right now, when it comes to the Boruto series, it's up. up. That's all I have for this one. I'm Tim. As always, people, have an awesome day. Subscribe and hit that bell to get more. Thank you so much. What I'm doing, this Revenge of the Nerd. How you wanna say hi? Oh, that's why I'm How you wanna say hi? Oh, that's why.